I'd like to welcome you all to Landmark on Main Street's Gene Rimsky Theater, and also welcome to those joining us via live stream. I'm Amanda Kowalczyk, Manager of Community Affairs. Tonight, we are all gathered here at the Gene Rimsky Theater to present to you the next in our Conversations from Main Street series, A Mother's Guide Through Autism. This series is generously sponsored by the Angela and Scott Jagger Foundation. Angela is here with us tonight, and we'd like to thank her for her ongoing support. The idea behind these events is to bring our community together, to hold discussions on important issues, build our connections with one another, and foster a sense of community amongst the people of our town and neighboring towns. The inspiration for this particular evening came from two amazing women, Councilwoman Mariann Dalimonte and our moderator and co-founder of the Nicolas Center, Stella Spankos. They join me on stage here tonight, along with our other esteemed panelists who will be introduced in a moment by Stella. And before I turn it over to her, I just wanted to mention our next conversation, which will be taking place on November 16th with the League of Women Voters. It will be a conversation with State Senator Jack Martins and State Representative Gina Saliti. More information will be up on our website about this soon. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Stella, who will get our evening started.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I have a big mouth, so I really don't need a microphone. Thanks. We are very, very grateful for this evening. Again, thank you so much to the Jagger family. It is absolute honor for you to sponsor this. So I'd like to introduce Bridget and Shipman, who's the author of the book, and I'd just like to give you a little bit of an introduction. She had on Facebook, she had a website and that she started a group to help support parents, grandparents struggling with the whole journey, the diagnosis, all of it. So I typed in a response to a question that was asked by a young mother, and from that, Bridget, said, who are you? And she looked me up, and the next thing we started a friendship. Turns out, what they say, in this world, it's serendipitous, and so we started talking. She has a son with autism, 31 years old, Joseph. Joseph is actually like a week older than my son. We found out that our birthdays are a week apart in February, and we found out that we were both teachers in a prior life, and it just kept going, unfortunately, both our husbands died very young and suddenly, and left us alone with this journey and to navigate and a child with autism to raise. So through this, Bridget started writing her book. Her book is available over there. The book is very interesting because Bridget wrote one half the book, and if you turn the book the other side, her son, 31-year-old autism, wrote his part as far as growing up and what his experience was like. So again, it's very touching. It's a whole different perspective on autism, and her mission is about knowledge, hope, and inspiration. And since then, she has also gone on to being a life coach for parents with autism, because it's a daunting and exhausting experience, emotionally draining on marriage and families and other children, families, relatives. So it's not just a little self-contained problem. It affects everybody. So again, the purpose of her book was to reach as many moms as possible. So with that, I'm going to bring Bridget out here, and she's going to read an excerpt from her book, and then we're going to bring out some expert panelists and field some questions. So sit back, enjoy. Thank you so much for coming. Brigitte Shipman. Ladies and gentlemen, Bridget. Thank you very much, sweetheart.
What a lovely introduction. Thank you all for attending here this evening, and those of you that are at home watching, thank you for showing up. As Stella said, and the whole reason behind this evening is to build community, and it doesn't matter really where you live or where you're at. We're all on this journey together. So I think that's what I want to talk about. It was a really hard decision to decide which chapter I was going to actually read from this evening, but I chose chapter 10 because it's always a mother's guide. And I'm on this journey until the day I leave this earth, and it's a meaningful part of the book that I'm going to talk about in just a few minutes. But the big thing that I want you to have an understanding about a little bit more about the book before I do that. So as Stella said, the book cover is unique. I had to fight for it a bit because when I wanted the metaphor for the book, which is my cover, my journey, and then turn it over to the flip side for Joseph's journey, it was like, well, we don't know that a book cover's ever been done like that. And I'm like, well, we're going to figure it out because it's too important. It's a message because we as parents, and in particularly, I refer to as moms because that's what I am. It is a totally different perspective of the journey. Although I have spent just about every single day of my son's life with him, his world was very different than mine. So on the days that he was having a very difficult time, maybe I had the stress, but I didn't know what was going on really with him. And the reverse side of that is when I was majorly stressed, he was fine. You know, the first day I dropped him off to be able to get some socialization at a local daycare. I knew everybody. I live in a small town. And I drove around the side of the fence to see, because he just stood in a corner. He was about 3 years old, 3.5 maybe. And then when I drove around, I was hoping to see him engaged with the other children, and he was in fact still standing in the exact place that I had left him. And instantly, the emotions start coming, and what have I done? Why did I do that? Oh my goodness, and the guilt, the emotional stress that comes with this journey. Everyone that is here can probably relate to it. And it is very important to understand that my journey is different than Joseph's. So you see on the front, it's all about healing. And when you flip it over, this is through the eyes of the guided, which brings me to how Mother's Guide Through Autism came to be. But before I tell you that, I want you to notice that on the back of the book on Joseph's cover, which he designed, his thoughts came through. They interviewed him for this. He wanted, there's a little man. Joseph's all about detail. Things that I wouldn't see in this world, he sees and thinks about. And he wanted the man on the mountain looking up at the sky for wisdom. And it's such a beautiful idea. And so it brings more meaning to all of it when you know the backside of the story. But Mother's Guide Through Autism, Stella told you how we met. I had been a teacher, went into life coaching, and then originally went into health and wellness coaching, but I kept getting messages from people in our community, and I had a lovely embroidered framed gift. I had people come up to me and say, Joseph's on the local radio station, and he's, you know, he had a fan club. So there were just all different kinds of conversations that kept coming up. And so I was very passionate about helping parents, about helping teachers have a better understanding of what autism is, so that we can grow as a community and help these kids turn into adults that are happy. Because as a parent, isn't that what we all want? To know that our child is happy, whatever that looks like. So I asked my son, he was still living at home at that time, and I asked him, I said, Joseph, what would you think about doing a podcast together? He was working at the local radio station. He thought that was a pretty cool idea. So we decided, yeah, we would do a podcast. Then it came to coming up with the name of our work together. And I asked him, I said, Joseph, what have I been to you so far in your life as your mom? What have I been to you? And he thought for just a second, and he said, well, nothing. And I know, hey, I don't take anything Joseph says personal because he is very honest. So really, there was nothing. And so I thought, well, okay, he's processing. He'll come up with something whenever. I said, well, if you think of something in a couple days, just let me know. And then instantly he said, no, wait, I see you on a big mountain, and you have a long gray beard, and he did this, and you're sitting on top of the mountain. I go, oh, cool, so kind of like a wizard, like wisdom, you know? And then he said, no, wait, you've been my tour guide of life. And then I thought, Mother's Guide, I'm your tour guide. So everything we do is under a Mother's Guide Through Autism. And that's the story behind it, because that is what I have been and still am with with my son Joseph. He, I have to tell you a happy something. So at that time, this is 4 years ago, he was still living at home. And you can understand the roller coaster ride of becoming an adult. And so, and this is another reason why I chose this chapter. He had decided that he met a young lady online, wonderful young lady. They're still together. And I always told him, now, if you leave this job, because he loved his job at the radio station, you always make sure you have another job before you go. But he came home one day, he gave his 2 weeks notice, and he was moving 2.5 hours away from home to go with his girlfriend that he loves, and again, they're still together. So that was a bit of a moment for me. And then as it turns out, he got a full-time job. He is a full-time custodian at the university in that town. He is independent. And I'm telling you this because he would be here with me, but he's saving up his days to come home for Christmas. So he doesn't have enough of the days from his new job where he can spend Christmas at home. So we're going to work on that. Hopefully we'll get more speaking engagements and Joseph can start coming with me. But I had to tell you that because I know that if what we're trying to do is spread hope and knowledge and inspiration, then we need to talk about some of the good things and the wins that our children have, big or small, it doesn't matter. A win's a win. And as you travel on your journey, try to stop I'm probably giving you my age, but Stop and Smell the Roses, you know, that old song, because you can enjoy this journey. You can. And this is coming from a mom who has a son 31 years old, and I didn't really start enjoying, really truly enjoying my journey until I did the work myself. And that's a hard concept, and I understand that it is, and I'm not saying that it was easy for me. Life, I call them life tsunamis. Life tsunamis have a way of challenging us, and my son being diagnosed with autism was the first life tsunami that I experienced in my life, and I still didn't pay attention. You know, I'm a professional fixer. I overgoal. I think I can save everybody in the world, and I just forgot about myself. So as a result, I missed out on a lot of the joy that I could have experienced because every moment with my son was a teaching moment. So there's pros and cons with that, but what I will say to you is, from my mother's heart to yours, this is why I wrote the book. I wrote it because I came across so many parents, so many moms that really, really wanted to work with me, but they just don't have any extra, not a dime extra to spend. So I was talking to my virtual assistant and I said, you know, I don't know what to do. We have the podcast, we have this, we have that. And I'm like, okay, I want to write a book with Joseph because I want to help as many. I mean, even if you don't want to, if you're not ready, it's okay. And I talk about that. You know, it's okay. Meet yourself where you're at. You are where you are, and it's perfect. So this book is written as a learning, as a workbook, as a coaching book, because you are on a journey. That's what we're all on, okay? So in the book, you'll notice I start out, and we do the icky work at first, but the most important work, which is how to deal with your pain and how to deal with your grief. A lot of parents don't realize that they are, in fact, grieving. You are, and that's okay. It doesn't matter. We all grieve in some way. So I take you through that. Then I take you through how to rock advocacy with kindness, because that's a doozy, isn't it? When you're dealing with people who just don't get it. They don't understand the journey that you're on. It can be frustrating, and what I have figured out is the person sitting across from you just may not know. They may not understand, and that's right. So we, as the team captains of our support group, because that's what we all are, need to guide with kindness, and that's difficult. So I give some of those tools. And by the way, I also let you know that you are all superheroes. Every single person is a superhero once you become a parent. And then when you have a child that has a lifelong disability, boy, you get all kinds of powers. You know, you can go with no sleep, no food, going to the bathroom every now and then, you know, when hopefully they're quiet for just a moment, you can run to the restroom. You're a superhero. But superheroes, even Superman, Wonder Woman, all of them need to refuel. That's the premise here. How do you refuel? How do you keep going? How do you make the most out of your life, your child's life, and all of the above? And then I take you through self-compassion. That's a doozy because a lot of us don't like to put ourselves first. It's very, very difficult to do that. And I understand it because I still struggle with it, but you step up, you let the guilt go. That's why we do this work. And you do take time for yourself, guilt-free. And lastly, when you're having one of those days, which I'm pretty sure we all do, because I still do, there's a nice section in the book that you can just make a copy of it and have a mantra or some type of a remembering to get yourself through those dark times. So this book is for you. And when you get to Joseph's section, that's where you get to see real writing, because in fact, Joseph is a gifted writer, not me. And you will enjoy his perspective and the way he explains things to you. And I'll read a little bit from that in just a minute as well. I also just want to take a second. I know I hit on the importance of you taking care of yourself several times, but when you're on your journey, I think that it's important to remember 3 things. So let's say you get a diagnosis, or let's say you had a diagnosis several years ago and you're still in that cycle where every day is a challenge. You know, you have those days where you really don't want to get out of bed, and I get it. The first thing to do is to do you. That's your first stop. First stop, how can I manage this? How can I navigate this? Challenging. And I'm going to keep talking about it because it is the number 1 stop. The second thing I would say is the relationship. So these 3 things all work together. Number 1, I'm going to do my healing, my work. Number 2, this is going to help my relationship with my child. I had somebody ask me, you know, I watch you and Joseph, you have such a great relationship. And I say, yes, we do, but it's because I, number 3, had to learn how to communicate. So depending on where your child is on the spectrum, we all somehow communicate with our child. And with Joseph still, he'll explain something to me, and I'll say, oh, just a second. I'm sorry, Joseph, I really didn't understand what you're trying to say. And then I can see him visualizing how he's going to try to explain it to me. And then in turn, he'll say to me, I don't know what you mean. And then I go to that place and think, okay, how can I break this down? How can I speak Joseph's language? And then, so we speak 2 different languages, and we manage because we understand that we do. So then that communication comes back to the fact that you did the work, it builds the relationship, there's healing that goes on, and you change your family dynamic, right? Because when the head of the household, when you're in an environment and that person is stressed out, our kids feel it. They have a 6th sense. I know Joseph does. And when I could let go of that, then he was able to, in turn, get more comfortable and less stressed out. And we talk about that when he gets stressed now. And how do you manage that? And by the way, he gave me some of the best advice for that. Because I asked him one day, I said, Joseph, how do you manage with stress? And he goes to a visual, and he said, if you'll just think about a river, and you go with the river, you flow with it, he goes, instead of trying to swim against it and just accept it. Because one day I asked Joseph, because he has these great one-liners, they're profound. And I said, Joseph, what do you think my life lesson is? And he said, letting go. And I was like, oh, wow. You know what? You're right. I'm terrible at letting go. I hang on to everything, and, you know, even way past its time. And so to be able to really let go and embrace, and I talk about acceptance in the book, about when you are really, truly okay with not being okay. and you can look at things through a different lens, that's when the family dynamics change. That's when the relationships grow. And I'm not saying it's easy, but you can look at things much differently and see the world differently and have all these tools to be able to, when you lose it, because I do too, you get into that cycle and the self-talk and all the things that we do as parents, right? But there are tools. There is a way, and I know because I've done it. So your journey is about building that resilience and your joy and becoming whole with things the way they are, not the way you want them to be. So that is what I wanted to share a little bit about our journey. Now I am going to actually read from the book. So I'm so excited. Again, I told you why I chose chapter 10, Always a Mother Guide. And by the way, this is on page 94 and 95 for those of you, if you already have your book with you. So here we go. There's nothing like Joseph's one-liners to make me ponder the truth that he speaks. Several years ago, I asked him what he thought my biggest life lesson was. He instantly answered, "You need to learn how to let go." Apparently, he has observed more about me than I ever given him credit for on our journey together. I knew that he was absolutely right. Yes, I did need to learn how to let go. Joseph introduced me to an American mythologist, writer, and lecturer, Joseph Campbell, and his work, from which I now am learning from. Here is a quote. And he says, "We must let go of the life we planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us." When I read this, I instantly thought of what my son had so wisely shared with me. Yes, I needed to let go so that I could live the life that I had with more joy and grace. I had struggled to let go of pretty much anything that didn't go my way. I wanted to know more about letting go in terms of how to live my life more positively. So I researched a bit and found an article from Psychology Today. The author, Andrea Matthews, LPC, NCC, began with the quote, "Just let it go, man. Let it go." What I discovered was that when I held on to something, I was in fact bargaining. According to Matthews, bargaining is one of the stages of grief that I mentioned in chapter 4. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, in her 1969 groundbreaking classic on death and dying, changed our thinking about the grief process. Today, her theory of the stages of grief is applied not only to bereavement, but also relevant to any difficult adjustment process. We all want to hold on to things, people, places, life circumstances, because we don't want to lose them. We often hold on even longer when we get stuck in the bargaining stage. I can really relate to this idea of bargaining. I often bargained with God, praying that if He changed whatever I needed, then I would do X, Y, or Z. Sometimes my prayers would be answered, and then I thought I better follow through on what I had promised, or I might get hit by lightning. Luckily, I usually did a pretty good job of keeping my promises to God. Matthews also adds that bargaining is based in the belief that the loss is wrong and must therefore be made right. I know that when I think of the loss I felt when Joseph was diagnosed, that it definitely felt wrong. I know that I didn't plan on this, nor did I want to see my child suffer. So yes, I had a hard time accepting what life has dealt me. I do hold on, and I bargain when I'm not ready to let go of what is. What I've learned is that letting go is truly having faith. allowing life to flow, and becoming a person with a deeper understanding of self. I now have a deeper understanding of both myself and when I'm holding on to something for too long. When I catch myself getting stuck in bargaining, I can now practice allowing with grace. I love this prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. For parents of children with autism, letting go is essential. No, I didn't plan on having a child with a lifelong disability, but then I also didn't plan for life at 58 being as it is today. I'm a single, empty nester, a new business owner, a type 1 diabetic, and loving every minute of what is on most days. The difference now is that I've been able to shift how I perceive my life. My plans may not work out, but I now can see that maybe what actually is maybe better than what I had planned. Joseph is who he is, and that is exactly who he needs to be. I couldn't see that for many years. Although I wanted a different life for him, his life has become his own. This is from Joseph, chapter 6, and it's in his conclusion. He says, I hope that my story will serve as an example for how the stereotypes surrounding a diagnosis cannot and will not ever fully prescribe or define who somebody is. Clearly, the way parents, professionals, and society at large address autism can make all the difference in how able people on the spectrum are able to live happy, fulfilling, and meaningful lives just like anyone else. If you finished reading this book and are now at the end, you certainly are going in the right direction. If you're a mother's guide, let this book serve as a guide for you on your journey to guide those in need. Even though this is just one perspective, everyone's autism is unique. There are some things we on the spectrum all agree on, and I hope that my point of view has given you some insight into how to understand your children and others like them. And most of all, I wish a happy, fulfilling, and meaningful life for everyone, with love standing by us, advocating and fighting for us, and helping us advocate and fight for ourselves. That is certainly possible. Despite some grim predictions for my life, I think I turned out pretty well. With your help, I am sure that no matter what anyone else says or thinks, your children, loved ones on the spectrum can also turn out well and make their mark on the world. Take it from someone who's been through it. I'm okay, and you're going to be okay too. From introductions of the book. This is the last segment, and it is a very meaningful way to end this talk, or at least this part of it. We've got a lot more over here with the panelists. This is from the introductions of A Mother's Guide, from my half of the book, pages 12 to 13. This is a blueprint of healing that I personally discovered for myself. I've restructured it to fit as many mothers' hearts as possible. For some of you, this book will be a daily read and healing application. For others, it might be a book to use and then put down. I want to make it clear that any way you use this book is perfect. It's perfect because you will choose how it works for you to meet yourself where you are at any given moment. I look forward to sharing my heart with your heart. I want to disclose that I'm still on my own autism journey as a mother's guide. I will continue as a mother's guide for the rest of my life. As I move forward, my intentional purpose is to continue to share my story and pay it forward with what I have learned. I am a teacher at heart, so this is my love language, to teach, guide, and continue learning. May you find peace and healing as you move through this healing guide. This is a prayer I wrote to use whenever you are losing hope and you find yourself on your knees. Mother's Guide's prayer. I pray from the depth of my mother's soul to release my child from suffering, to release my heart from deep sorrow and fear for our future, to send earth angels to guide us on our long journey, to keep my mind, body, and spirit filled with hope as I go through my life guiding my child's disabilities and gifts. May others who judge me be forgiven as I have been forgiven. Give me the strength and courage to be the mother's guide my child needs when needed, and the intuition to allow them to fly to their own destiny. Please guide my child with love and patience, all the while guiding me, my child's mother guide. Amen. And now I'll come join you all.
Thank you very much, Bridget. I hope you all enjoyed that. Okay, very quickly, I am going to let the panelists introduce themselves. We have Dr. Snow. She needs a mic.
Hello. Hello, I'm Dr. Amorita Snow. I'm a pediatrician, and I have a son who's 23 years old, who's on the spectrum, who is part of the Nicolas Center.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dale Coffin. I am on the board of the Nicolas Center. I'm also an occupational therapist, and I have a 25-year-old son with autism.
She's being modest. She's a doctor, okay? It's a PhD you're looking at, okay? All right, Dr. Dale.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy Scalchunes. I am a board-certified behavior analyst and a licensed behavior analyst here in New York State, and I have the privilege of being the Associate Executive Director of Programs at a wonderful life enrichment center co-founded by our moderator here called the Nicolas Center.
Okay. I'd just like to thank you so much. I'd also like to give a shout out to my co-founder, Nicole Ferrara, sitting here. She is the executive director of the Nicolas Center, and I would never have done this without her. So just tells you, how highly I always have thought of her before we started this journey 13 years ago, and continue. So thank you, Nicole, for putting up with me. Okay. First question. First question is for Dr. Snow. Once a parent receives a diagnosis such as Autism Spectrum Disorder, ASD, what is the first thing they should do? And it is overwhelming and confusing, so is there a number one thing to do on a parent's list?
Yes, I would say really the first thing to do, as Bridget had said, is to put aside what you thought your child was going to be. You need to mourn, do whatever you have to do, go through that part of the journey as quick as you can, because your child needs you. You're going to be his advocate or her advocate for life, and you will go through it, and you will be fine, and you will be stronger for it.
The second question is for Jeremy, our BCBA. If a person is diagnosed later in life, what therapies would benefit them?
I think it's important to say from the outset that there's no one right answer for all autistic adults. The process of finding the right therapy is an individualized one, and it's largely dependent on the needs of the individual, challenges, but also strengths that they would like to capitalize on as well. That being said, there are a number of evidence-based practices that have worked wonders in a variety of different areas for autistic individuals, ranging from speech-language pathology to occupational therapy, applied behavior analysis, mental health counseling, and more. And an aspect of these types of therapies is that they don't necessarily have to be conducted in an overly contrived or overly clinical setting. They can be done in the individual's naturalistic life. And as they are on a job site, they could be receiving speech-language pathology, or in a recreational setting, they could be receiving ABA. And that kind of in vivo training almost expedites the skill acquisition process. For example, in applied behavior analysis, which is the practice that I specialize in, there's a evidence-based teaching strategy called modeling. And it's when you, and I found it to be incredibly conducive for the workplace. If the individual has a task that they're working on, you can take that task and you could break it down into small incremental steps written down onto something called a task analysis. And then you can model each micro step of the grand task for the individual. You model the step, the individual immediately follows. And with that, there's hands-on learning, there is visual learning, auditory learning if you want to add some narratives to it, and there's all different types of learning involved in this step that's so easy for anybody to adopt in the workplace. I also think that this may not be the case for everybody, but for an individual who's received a diagnosis later in life, I've supported a fair amount of individuals who received a late diagnosis, and I found a commonality that due to the lack of the diagnosis, they may have felt out of place in a lot of areas growing up. Maybe the way that they were being taught in the classroom wasn't conducive to the way that they learn. Maybe they couldn't connect with their peers socially, or they had different interests, and that kind of constant feeling of being out of place or being othered can take a significant toll on. In short, there's no right answer for everybody. It's really largely dependent on the individual, but focusing on mental health and community is incredibly important. And while community may not be a therapy, it's certainly therapeutic.
Thank you. I see a lot of heads nodding. Just by show of hands, how many of you are parents? How many of you are grandparents and have a child or a grandchild on? And how many are you in the profession? Thank you, my staff. Yeah. Just, yes. My heart goes out to all of you, and we are only down the block, so even if you just need a phone call, somebody to talk to, that's what we do. That's why we're here. We have another saying in the field: if you know one person with autism, you know one person with autism, because they are all so unique and different. So it's not a cluster, it's not a group thing. It's an individual. So I just wanted to put that out there. Next question is for Bridget. What is the best advice you can give parents raising kids with autism?
That diagnosis does not define you or your child. I want you to know that. I want you to know that you can actually find happiness and enjoyment in your life. When we stop the comparison game that we all play, or I played, when I would, for example, take Joseph to soccer, and he would, be mad because somebody kicked the ball, not to him, away from him. All those moments that we have where we watch or look at others and go, oh, why? So my best advice to you is to just take a breath. And just what I talked about earlier is to find your new normal and shift and find the joy that's right before you. And if it's a hard thing to find, I get that too, but just look at your beautiful child, and when they smile at you, and remember that this is your journey, and it's a beautiful one when you shift in that direction.
Thank you. Dr. Dale, most parents fear the future for their children with autism. What can they do to prepare?
So I think preparation comes the day after your child is diagnosed. Allow yourself 2 or 3 days to cry, and after that, get off the couch and just keep going and going and going. You are their biggest advocate in life in every stage and step that they take, in any and everything that they do, be it going to a birthday party with peers, getting them to tolerate being in Chuck E. Cheese, and being able to follow simple directions. It comes every step and stage in life. And always remember that when your child or grandchild or nephew or niece is initially diagnosed at 2 years old, they're not going to look like that when they're 25 and 22. That is only a snapshot of who they are. And I know how overwhelming that can be at that point in time. But don't get drenched down by that. Don't think about, well, are they ever going to go to college? Are they ever going to get married? Are they ever going to have kids? Try not to focus so much on that in the future. Focus on the here and now, because all of the little things that they are doing, you will miss because you're grieving. You need to pay attention to the small things. And every small thing that they do is a win. Getting through the day of school without getting a phone call. I used to dread looking at my phone. I'd be like, oh no. I would get the call. He wouldn't get on the school bus, or he wouldn't get off the school bus, or whatever it is. Every achievement, glow in that, because it goes by so fast. I mean, I can't believe my son is 25 now, and it's just amazing the things that he's been able to do at that point in time. And preparation may change over a period of time, because they may gain skills and lose certain skills and need help acquiring other skills as they get older and as you get older. But one thing that I know all parents fear is what happens to their child if something happens to you. And unfortunately, you have to always think about your life, what it will be like in terms of preparing them. And there's things that we have to put in place that we may not be ready to. Like now, I'm not ready for my son to live alone, but it's something that I know I have to face. So I've given myself 5 years to adjust. And I'm hoping by the time he's 30 that I will be okay with that. And that's the goal that I'm working towards. So you really have to make plans for those things, and every step of the way. Life is going to look so different from elementary school, middle school, high school, and then work situations. You have to think in advance, and you always have to think about the bigger picture. It's never just, okay, he got invited to a friend's house and I can send him. You have to think about who's going to be there. Are there any triggers? Do they have a dog? Do they have bright lights? All of those things come into play. So it's always the bigger picture that you have to keep in mind.
Thank you. Next question is for Dr. Snow. Why is self-compassion and self-care for the caregivers important, even crucial?
I think it's most important because you're the one who's in charge of everything, right? So the boss oversees everything. If the house isn't up to par, if you're not feeling well, if you're on the couch, no one's cooking dinner, no one's looking after him, he's trying to run out the door, all kinds of things are happening. So you have to, my philosophy is, even if it's just 15 minutes a day, do something that you love, just for you. Close your eyes, take a walk in the park, read your favorite book, cook, garden, whatever it is that you love. do that for a period of time, every single day, set some time aside. Exercise, doesn't matter what it is, just alone for you to recharge. And you feel so much better, and you have new ideas. It makes you better, and you're ready to face whatever new horrible thing is behind the door, which we all know happens. And you just clean it up and you keep going.
Thank you. Next question is for Dr. Dale and Dr. Snow. How did you navigate your child's autism journey, including transition into adulthood?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
So as an OT, I feel that I had an advantage over the regular person. During meetings, I was given the same hard time as you guys were given the same hard time and were denied services. I threatened to go to arbitration. I threatened to get an advocate. All of those things were really important. I think that you have to be very accepting of what services may be offered to you, and don't be so hesitant to turn things down. A lot of times I hear from my own clients, no, I don't think they need OT. No, I don't want it on their IEP. You know, I don't want them to have a record. And I'm like, who's gonna care what services they got when they were 3 years old, when they're 25? It doesn't matter. So I think every step along the way, I listened to what people had to say, and I gave them the opportunity to speak about my child, but who knows their child the best, right? You do. And I allowed them to say what they needed to say, and then I would speak my piece, and I would say, well, I don't agree with this, and I don't know why this assessment was given, and I don't agree with that, and I think that this is wrong, and this report has this wrong child's name information in it, and I would give them the hard time back. And I was at every meeting, every parent-teacher meeting, every IEP meeting, everything at school, I was there. And they got to know me, which I think makes a difference also. Even at back to school night, I would hear the school psychologist say, well, they never got any visitors. Guess who was knocking on the door? Hi. It's important to do that, to conjure up those relationships, because those are the people that are gonna help you. At the time, I was a single parent, and I didn't have enough funds to apply for guardianship to pay a lawyer, and it was a school psychologist that showed me how to do it myself. So you wanna make sure that you maintain those relationships, because they are very, very important. I was at a football game, and a parent told me about Ken's crew, and that's how I found out about it, and my son was able to get a job through them, and he's been working with them for the last 5 years. So you never know who you're gonna meet along the way. You never know who's gonna be a friend or foe, or someone that knows someone that knows someone that can really help you. You need to be present in everything that they do, even on those days when you don't want to or when you don't feel like it. Like I said, I always give myself a time limit. Okay, I'm gonna cry for 1 day because he graduated from high school, and what happens next, right? So I always try not to make it any longer than that, but if he has an issue at work, they know to call me, and I'm the person yelling at him to get going. So you have to be their biggest advocate along the way, and that looks very different at different points in their lives, and that's the one thing that you need to remember, is that it looks different as they grow older and as you grow older.
My journey, believe it or not, I was in denial for about 2 years that he had autism. He finally was diagnosed when he was 3 years old. And then I, like I said, mourned my period of time, got up and found every single conference and information that I could find. I talked to parents, I went to parent groups, I looked at studies, I did everything I could. In med school, when I was there, there was no one who was on the spectrum that we saw, not a single child. So I really didn't know much about it. I had had one patient before that who was on the spectrum, and I told her, you know what, I don't know much, but we're gonna find out everything we can. And we went through everything, and we went through articles, and I went to see Temple Grandin and listen to her because she's on the spectrum, and she could give me some perspective as to what he was gonna start to go through. A little bit, because as we said, one person is one person, and everyone's experience is very different. But you should go and get every service that you need for your child. If they offer it to you, take it. Don't think that, oh, he's gonna be fine and he's gonna have less of the symptoms and he's not gonna need social skills, parent training. There's so many different things that they continue to have. My son was very severe when he was young. I've brought him a long way, and it took me a long time to realize that. And now he's at the Nicolas Center and he's working. At that point, I never thought that was gonna happen. I thought he was gonna be in diapers forever, for example. So everything you can. In terms of going to adulthood, that I thought was the most difficult, because when you have school, the district does help you. They offer you the services, you're able to get them. But once they're adults, you're really on your own. They give you somewhat of a guide to tell you to apply for SSI and Medicaid and the rest. But there isn't anyone there telling you exactly what else you need to do. So there are a few places that can do that now, which I'm very grateful for. But I would talk to parents, different groups, parent to parent. There are a lot of different resources now that didn't exist before. But I would do that, and like I said, we parents really know all the different avenues there are in the different places, because we've been there. We walk the walk. So you'll be fine, and just keep going, as I said.
Yes.
Conversation from the audience. I would like to hear your response to your comments at that point. I was about to ask, my real concern.
Is it on?
It's on? Is it on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, there I am. It's always been my concern when we have situations like this, whether it's now the interest in mental health, for example, to what extent are the services adequate in this society? To what extent is the education of the nation as a whole with regard to this adequate? I'd like to have your honest appraisal on that. Do we have enough people? I'm well aware of what's going on in the health field, and when don't have an adequate number of personnel in the health field generally. So could you speak to those points?
The short answer is no, I don't think we have enough people.
How do we get there?
We really need to train more people, and we really need to have people who are interested and dedicated. I really think special needs teachers are God sends, they're angels. It's a calling to be an OT, to be a PT, to take care of these children. Parents have them at home, and really we're just pulling our hair out. So it's wonderful when one of these professionals help us with the different things that they're going through. Some children bang their head against the wall. Others are crawling out of their skin. There's all kinds of things that go on, and it's wonderful when they can help. So I think there's a lot more people who are studying. There are a lot more programs in school than there ever was. So I think as a nation, we're on the right track. We're not there yet, but I think we're on the right track.
Part of that comes with also funding for early intervention programming. Instead of cutting back in terms of rates, they should really be increasing. As a private contractor myself, the rates haven't changed in the last 15 years for reimbursement to early intervention and
So how do we
preschoolers.
get that done?
I'm sorry?
How can parents who are dealing with the issues be advocates for those kinds of issues?
Yeah, they need to speak to their Congress people, senators, Politician. No, I'm sorry. Put you on the spot, right? I'm sorry. I'm
We'll
sorry.
start local with
When
Mariann.
there's events in Albany, parents need to go. You know, your voices need to be heard. Your voices are really strong. And New York, believe it or not, is one of the most generous
It's
states
frightening.
when it comes to services. If you move to Connecticut or New Jersey, I'm very sorry you would not be getting the services that you get here in New York.
Because you're a professional in the
Yes,
field? Or
yes.
because we really have that information out to the public?
No, because I'm a professional in the field.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's correct.
How do we change the public perception?
Right. There was, right. It's a start.
Listen, I started, first of all, I'm from Arkansas, so I don't know the New York stuff. Let me just make that very clear. Yeah, I'm just making up excuses. No, but, you know, I think it's nationwide, I think it's worldwide, because as Joseph and I have interviewed people from all over the world on our podcast, the needs are everywhere. State by state, it is night and day. I mean, it is, you can go across the thing. But I started a support group back in the 90s when Joseph was 6 years old. And what I would say to you is that the parents would be involved up to a point. Grandparents were a lot of the caregivers. I think it's about building community. And I really do believe that, because what I have noticed is that when you have gatherings like this, yeah, so it's not enough. No, it's not, but it's something. And then as you build the community and you go out there as parents of kids, as grandparents of kids, and advocate, it's our job. It's our job. And, you know, look, we can say all day long, we know it's not enough. It hasn't been enough for 31 years. But it is better. And I think having these conversations and voicing all your concerns and your passions are where you begin, and you just keep moving forward one step at a time and take the wins.
I would just like to say that Janet Lavin from New York State Assembly, Women Gina Saliti, is actually here to hear this, and she is taking notes. So,
I also want to say, last week, there was a legislative breakfast that was given by a Long Island Family Advisory Council, and that is where parents and professionals came together to speak to the senators and congressmen who did attend. And it was very helpful, I thought, and I made a lot of connections.
Are there specific funding groups or professional groups who can advocate for funding in this area?
That I don't know if someone else knows this.
I believe, Nicole, wouldn't that be the committee from, who is the center that runs it up in Albany, who's from Westchester, that we spoke? What's his name? What's that?
Council is a consortium of all the provider agencies in Long Island and all across the state.
Put the mic closer to your mouth.
Sorry.
Sorry.
So there is a current group, an alliance called the Interagency Council, and it's a huge consortium of all the different human service providers who, and that particular group, it's called IAC, and they just recently merged because we used to have just the Long Island Alliance, and so in order to make a much larger movement, IAC mobilizes many of the talks and rallies up in Albany. They keep all of the human service provider executives in all the different departments, whether it's fiscal. They keep them apprised of the decisions that are being made, what bills we need to pay very close attention to. So there is a lot of activity, but, and they're fighting. They fight really hard, and they have lobbyists. But at the end of the day, it sometimes does get stuck. It kind of just stops up at Congress or something, you know, like we'll have a lot of our local public officials do an incredible job getting it as far as they can get it. And they have made so much progress. But in regards to what you were talking about, the pay rate for early intervention, as you know, when you go into the adult services, it's tied to Medicaid. So the cost that's received by these young people who are transitioning out of high school is now at a fraction of the cost. So now these children, young adult children, still require the same level of care, but now it's expected to be delivered at the fraction of the cost because it's directly tied to Medicaid. So until Medicaid recognizes or can increase, and I've had this conversation with Assemblyman Salitti, is the reimbursement rate is directly tied to Medicaid. So until there is some Medicaid, some kind of legislation that increases those reimbursement rates, I think that it's going to be very difficult to continue, for the individuals to secure staff so that they can get paid a living wage. Many of these providers that provide care to individuals in the adult world, I mean, they're making a minimum wage. And yet they're expected to be a pseudo speech therapist, a pseudo home care aide, a pseudo occupational therapist. And they're asked to do very Herculean tasks at such a, small. So I don't know who we go to make those types of big changes as far as reimbursement rates, but there are certain entities that are doing it, and hopefully we'll.
Yeah, they are trying,
more
but I mean,
progress.
for the record, we fought, we gave testimony, hearings up in Albany, which is the first time they've actually in I don't even decades even listened to the all of us on the ground level here, and we fought, and the governor gave our support employees, which they are on the front lines, they are our lifelines, and they have not received a cost of living increase that is kept up even close to inflation. And this year, what did she throw out? 4%? When they needed 8 to even break even? They were asking for 8.5, and they threw them, what, 4? 3.5, 4, something like that. Again, it's the same salary that you can make flipping burgers. Okay, and you're talking about the people that are dealing with our most precious assets, our families. Yes.
I'm standing up. I don't know why I'm standing up. I don't know. It's the teacher in me. Oh, hi, live stream. Hi, my name is Jennifer. I'm a special ed teacher by trade, but I have a 14-year-old with autism, among other things. And I have a lot of thoughts swirling in my head about this whole thing, but I think the biggest problems we have as a nation, perhaps as a community, as whatever, the biggest reasons why we don't have all these things that we should be having for our children, number one is the attitude that I know that I've received from people who have worked with my children in the past. I'm talking about before school, like when they were 0 to 3. The attitude of, well, they're not going to be able to do anything anyway, so why do we need to give them those services? I'm lucky. My son has had every single service he's needed since he's entered preschool. But before that, the NICU doctors, the nurses, the nurses were actually fabulous, but the NICU doctors, all the specialists, why do we need to provide him with that? He's on this path. Like, I'm like, well, what do you mean? I would go into the NICU every day happy that I had 2 surviving triplets. I was happy. And they would say, what's wrong with you? Why are you so happy? did the doctors give you medication? And I said, well, what do you mean? I'm supposed to be happy. I need to be happy for my children. I know that they're going to have a good future. I know it. But it was always, well, we don't know what to do, and we don't know don't worry, he's not going to do much. And Mariann knows him, Antoinette knows, they know him, they know my son. He's funny as heck. He's a good kid. So there's one side. And then the other side we have, because I'm part of the special ed PTA, is we have the stigma. The stigma of, I don't want to admit that my child has an issue and needs services. I'm a teacher. I see it from all sides. I'm actually a sub in the district, which is fun. But, they don't want to admit, and we see this with SEPTA a lot. Like, they don't want to admit that their child has a challenge and needs a service. So that is the other side of it. How do we get rid of that stigma? How do we do that? We've been trying for years to do it. We can't figure it out. If anyone has a good answer, I'd love it.
It's a very hard thing for parents to come to that level of acceptance, and it comes at different rates and stages from different experiences. The only thing that I can say is that I know in my practice, I have tried to educate parents as best as I could to just accept the service, not necessarily the label yet, but at least get someone in there to work with your child. Like, try it out, see if it works. You can always discontinue it. See if it helps, right? See what kind of change you can get within 6 months. At least give it 6 months. And then sometimes the person that they're working with becomes their confidant, their person that they can just talk to. And sometimes those people do make a dent with them, and they become more and more accepting to what they see. But I've seen it all throughout. I've seen individuals at 18 not diagnosed because their parents had the ability to put them in private school. They never got a diagnosis. They never got any type of services. It happens. But it's important to understand that we as practitioners are also advocates. We can only do what we can do. And I've resigned myself to the fact that not everyone is not at that point, right? You have to meet people where they are, put the information out there. Society is at a much better place than where they were 25 years ago when my kid was diagnosed. The library even offers free classes and sensory experiences, and you can go to a sensory gym and pay private pay now, and they actually have groups and activities. So for those people, that is what I recommend if they're not willing to hear the diagnosis or to receive the type of help that they actually need. I recommend those kinds of things initially.
Yeah, I just want to say I completely agree. In my practice, as a matter of fact, just yesterday, I saw a family that I had said to them, he really needs speech therapy, he really needs something else. And as a practitioner, you really have to feel out the family and try to guide them through the journey that they have to go through. Some of them, again, are just not ready. And then I saw the family again 6 months later. She finally accepted the label, but still doesn't have him in the appropriate educational facility. So again, I want to see her again soon so I could try to gear her to get him into where he needs to be. But it's very hard with some people. They're still in denial, or they partially do. They really need to get through that journey a little quicker, and you just get them there as quickly as you can.
I was a parent member and an advocate for years, still am, and I've always told parents that when it's very obvious that they're not willing, they're totally closed-minded, and they just say he'll outgrow it. It's a little list, it's a little speech, they'll outgrow it. And I just said, okay, but these are your tax dollars paying into the school system. And I've been doing this for 20 years, and God bless, I've never had anybody die of an overdose of speech therapy or OT. So what do we have to lose? Just putting it out there, think about it, and then all of a sudden, maybe at some point. But it's also very frustrating. I happen to know, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, my husband, but, he's a very proud, very first generation Greek. And, got the whole Greek macho, whatever. And knows my son, he can't have a problem. He's got my gene pool. He's got mine too. And I'm not saying that the autism comes from your side of the family, but he is our child. And as his mother, I need to help this child. So it's also very stressful, and we all know it, on a marriage, okay? Because it really, especially when a man is looking at his son, he's carrying his name, it just cuts through, and they can just shut you off and get very defiant, oppositional, and so just want to, throw that out there.
I agree with everything the panel's talking about. I remember being at a conference the very beginning when Joseph was small, and there was a debate between the parents. They had a 16-year-old that they didn't want anyone to know that he was on the spectrum, and the 16-year-old was standing there. And I remember thinking back then, well, I wonder what he thinks about that, hearing his parents not want to acknowledge that he is autistic, right? So I kind of did things my way. I understand, first of all, that denial is powerful. I was in denial too. I thought, nah, it's just because he's a genius, which he is, by the way, but that's not what the issue was. So denial is powerful. It's useful when what we're going through is bigger than what our brains can handle. But then at some point, it becomes about the child and not about yourself. And so I get that it's hard. I am guilty of all of the above. But from my experience and from my conversations with my son, if you can just go ahead and again get the help for yourself and realize that this is the diagnosis, it's not, that doesn't make them hopeless or bad or anything like that. It's just simply that they are, and they do have a future. And so Joseph and I were on the front page of our local paper when he was 6, and it was out there, and I still don't regret it. And he will tell you that he tells people all the time he's autistic. So knowledge is power, and the more we can educate and have autism awareness, I think it does help. It's not easy, but it helps.
We have a question from the back there.
One moment. I think, did you want to say something? Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
I think part of the problem is that we don't get kids from elementary and middle school involved with special needs kids. I think what we do, I shouldn't say we do, what a lot of schools do is they want to separate them. And yeah, they'll be putting music and maybe they'll put in art. And I know like in Port Washington, Shriver has a thing for senior experience where you can volunteer. And I wonder if kids could get some type of social credit or something, and we could start having them help out with special needs kids and have maybe the groups come and help them with their homework. Like I know I was in Big Brothers Big Sisters in college, and we used to do that in Southampton with the high schoolers. Maybe we could do something with special needs kids where they could go and do activities and get some type of credit. They have the buddy club. Okay, so I didn't know that. Sorry.
Think like Best Buddies in Manhasset, we started a mentoring program where the high school seniors came in and ate lunch because the kids couldn't deal with the cafeteria, it was too overwhelming.
Right, but
But this is how you start, absolutely.
Yeah, and if you do it even earlier and you give these kids like middle school, okay, well, instead of like a Girl Scout badge, you'll get some type of credit, because I think the younger the kids are that experience these children, the more they'll accept them. They'll accept them, and I think that if they could get together, instead of separating them, and they could get together more, like even in elementary school, reading buddies, I know they have that in Manor Haven for kindergarten and 5th grade. Well, maybe they can do that. They can have, you know, if you come in on a Saturday at the library and you can read with these kids, then there's more acceptance as they get older.
when we first had we had a self-contained ABA program at one of the elementary schools in Manhasset. My son went through the Manhasset school, you know, I walked into the principal's office and I said, no, you know, all these kids, you have 6 kids here with special needs, and everybody, all the rest of the kids, they need, yeah, you are your brother's keeper. Okay, and I will tell you a little story. Dale was my son's occupational therapist from the time he was 3 on until the time he was 10 or 12. And I was so adamant that I made Manhasset hire her to do a push-in because we're going to talk about this in a second, because my son is profoundly affected by autism, and he's apraxic. He has no ability to speak. The frustration, you know, builds because he can't communicate into behavior, so you have these things. So one day, Dale was going to push in. The person that was supposed to meet my son off the bus called in sick. So they had to get a substitute aide. The substitute couldn't get to the school early enough and said it, but the assistant principal didn't get the message. So my son gets off the bus, and here he is. And at that time, my son's 31. They didn't have the devices we use. It was a big device called an Inky-Doo and all these other communication devices that was dragging around like a sewing machine or something. It was so heavy. So I have my little son, you know, who's like in 3rd grade or whatever, and Dale goes to take an OT, and it's now like 9:15, and Dale's going, something's not right here. He should have been in the class by now. You know, no. And the teacher's like, no, don't, you know, he's there. And Dale's like, no. Something is not right. Nicolas should have been here by now. And she's looking at her watch, getting concerned. Well, what happened? Because the aide didn't show up, the substitute aide, the attendant who was doing bus duty just grabbed one of the 6th graders. Yeah, I know. Grab one of the 6th graders, go, here, take him inside. So, okay? So there's my son with the backpack on and his Inky-Doo strapped around him. And there's my son like, she just dropped him off in the cafeteria. My poor son now finds his way to the main hall, and he's just walking down the main hall like this because everything's falling off of him, his backpack and his Inky-Doo and all. And one of the children, the class that he did his push-in for art and reading and everything else, said to the teacher, excuse me, but that's Nicolas in the hallway by himself. He's never supposed to be by himself. He's always supposed to have an aide. We know this. And teacher's like, sit down, you know, we're going to pledge allegiance, and just mind your own business, get away from sit in your chair. Right? No, that's Nicolas. Nicolas is never supposed to be left alone. So where was my son going? He was going straight out the exit door, walking down the main hall with everybody. Thank God Dale came down the front staircase and saw my son exiting the building. She's like, what is going on here? Okay? And, you know, thank God, because that would have been a very ugly situation. Yeah. Okay? But, yes, you were absolutely right. And this little boy, we paraded him around and made him Student of the Month.
That's great.
Because he was his brother's keeper.
I'd
Okay?
like to
And it was absolutely what we want to see in his colleagues, his fellow classmates.
I would also like to jump in on that. I'm from Herrick's, behind you, well, was. In Herrick's, we have middle school, typical children being buddies with the special ed kids in middle school. But I know personally, when my son was in kindergarten, he would play with all the children in his kindergarten class, typical and non-typical. And after school, all the boys were getting picked up by the mommies, and they were all having a play date, and Tim and Andrew and everybody was getting together to go over to Peter's house
And everyone was invited except Connor. And the only reason Connor wasn't going was because he had autism. And I had to deal with that, and he's still to this day. And he's 25 years old now.
I think there are a couple of things that keep running through my head in all of this discussion. One of them is we are in this room still using the term special education, and that is part of the problem. We live in an ableist society where we are all othering people who are different. And acceptance begins with self-acceptance. So what I'm hearing about the kids with autism is that a lot of them are fully self-accepting. It's us as adults who don't accept them and don't mainstream them. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's why there's so much strife and struggle.
That's a very good point.
The newest evidence-based literature asks us to refer to disability as this ability, which is gonna take some getting used to, but I think that coining that term, using this ability for individuality and inclusion is something that we will see more of.
Yeah. Amen. I would like to, a very important thing, ask. When I was trying desperately to figure out why my son was a little prisoner in his own body, I started doing a lot of research, and I came across Jean Ayres. She was the guru of sensory integration. She mapped out everything a child does into what part of the brain and what controls it. And then I finally figured out, once I heard the term, sensory integration dysfunction disorder. It was an absolute life changer for myself, and I would like Dr. Dale to explain what it is. When my son started with her, it took him six attempts to desperately try to motor plan to get into my SUV. And it was such a struggle. And I used to watch him and just could not figure it out. And then I call it the Dr. Dale flambe, fricassee, and fry my son. She would just turn him upside and flip him. But within 1 year, he went from taking 6 attempts at motor planning to get into the car. He was down to 3. The following year, 1, 2. Totally no problem. It's sensory integration dysfunction disorder, and I'd like Dr. Dale to explain what it is.
So sensory integration is how our body and brain make sense of information, vision, touch, movement, organization of skills. And what we see a lot of in children that are diagnosed with autism is that they are extremely disorganized in their approach to everything. They misinterpret signals, they misread information. So sitting here under these lights, our body adjusts to it. Like, we may move away, our vision accommodates it. Our children would be screaming, some of them. They would be covering their eyes, they would be walking back and forth, they would be hiding under the table. And that's because the way that their brain perceives information is just misread. And their response to it, to us, appears disorganized. So that's the best way to explain it, is that they misinterpret information. And your sensory information is everything: taste, touch, movement. And for our kids, it's very different in terms of their sensory needs. Some of our kids love and crave movement. They want to jump, they want to climb, they want to run. And some kids, they move away from movement. They want to lay on the floor. They want to, sleep. They want a lot of touching and a lot of pressure. So it's very different for every child. They don't have the same type of sensory threshold. For some kids, it takes a lot to get them going, and for some kids, it just takes a little. And that's the quick explanation of sensory integration. I could give you a 5-day lecture on that. to my
In
students.
short, what are techniques?
Short
or
and
what is
sweet.
what therapies do you implement when, you're trying to address, like a brushing? What is a brushing technique?
So brushing techniques are specific to children that have tactile sensitivity or are extremely defensive to touch. For some kids, it's as much as holding your hand to cross the street. They don't want to hold your hand. They don't like to be touched. They scream and fight to change their Pampers, their clothes. They don't want to wash their hair, cut their nails, wear socks. How many of our kids, as soon as they get home, they're naked, right? A lot of them, but they know when they're outside that they have to wear it. But, some of them won't wear hats. They don't like tags. They don't like shirts on their body. So the brushing protocol really works on addressing that. It also helps with being orally defensive. So kids that are problem eaters, picky eaters, don't eat crunchy foods or only eat crunchy foods. Their tolerance to textures and things like that are extremely different. Sensory integration really works on reorganizing the brain, so there's a lot of movement and activity involved with that. So that's where you'll see therapies or therapists using swings and therapy balls and scooters and balance beams and, swinging trapezes and a whole bunch of other things to stimulate the fluid between the inner ears and to reorganize brain activity, to retrain the brain. And that's where I think, for my son, I held him upside down many of times. I think that really helped him in the long run, was a lot of bombardment of the sensory system that started very early.
Thank you. My next question. Bridget, I'll start you off with this one. What can each of us do to pay it forward to offer autism awareness and acceptance?
I think it's similar to what we have been talking about. How to pay it forward is just to share your stories. Again, doing things like this, getting support, getting groups of parents, family members, community members, anybody who's willing to be a part of it, to have these conversations. I think that's the best way to pay it forward is to talk about it. Share your story. For example, like I said, Joseph and I have a podcast. I interview incredible people like Stella. She's paying it forward with Nicole, with the whole Nicolas Center, right? You guys are paying it forward in that way. I'm paying it forward by doing this, starting in a rural setting where there isn't any help or education for, people that have autistic children or who are autistic. Start a support group. Another mom that I interviewed started a music school. And letting these kids perform. Another one started therapy with horses for children and started a whole thing and took that. So it's finding your own voice, your own gifts, and then using that to spread as much of the hope and knowledge that you can individually. And I think that's the best way to pay it forward.
Excellent. Anybody else? Thank you. Jeremy, I have a question for you. Talk about the importance of vocational training, skills, and the opportunities to the autism population.
I think the big word there is opportunity. And I think the reason why this is such a healthy conversation is because a lot of the times on these panels or these discussions, and it's important to talk about ways that we can upskill these individuals through therapies, through vocational training. But a lot of the times the skills are there already and the opportunity is not. And, we all have a responsibility in that regard. And currently, the unemployment rate for autistic adults is 85%, which is extremely unsettling. And, you know, there's some individuals whose goal might not be employment, but there's also a reality that, you know, stigmatization, like you were saying, doesn't just exist amongst parents and educators. It really exists amongst employers as well. So employers have a responsibility to be open and to adapt and to create equity within their workplace and not create a work site that's geared towards one specific type of human being. You know, there's actually research that's suggesting, there's minimal research on the benefits of inclusive employment for autistic adults, but the small amount that does exist suggests that inclusive employers have higher retention rates, higher workplace cultures, more empathy and understanding within the workplace. So there are a lot of positives as well. And you know, the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, a couple of years ago, they released a new program called Supported Employment. And you know, we were talking about reimbursement rates for direct support professionals and job coaches. This has been quite a game-changing program that has been released from OPWDD. What they will actually do is if an advocate, a third-party advocate, reaches out to an employer, it talks to them about the benefits of becoming inclusive, gets them to agree to hire an individual, there are tax benefits for that employer, but also OPWDD will fund the first 6 months or so during, it's called the ETP process, the Employee Training Program, of the individual, the autistic individual's employment there. And they will also fund the job coach's salary as well to get the individual up to speed. And then at the end of the 6 months, or however long it takes during that ETP process, the employer can then put the individual on their payroll. So it's an added level of support, and it's a higher reimbursement rate, so we're able to pay our job coaches more as well.
And Jeremy, how many of our participants do we have in this supported employment environment in Port Washington?
In Port Washington, well, the Nicolas Center has contributed to the employment of over 50 autistic adults. And I don't know the exact number offhand, but and I know he wanted to be here tonight, but there's businesses here in Port Washington that have taken on this supportive employment program and have been raving about how it's benefiting their workplace culture, how it's impacting their productivity. So Steve Edelson from Smushed. Definitely go to Smush and get an ice cream sandwich, and very autism friendly. And also Harbor Deli just hired an individual.
They just hired one of ours.
As well. So with this new program, we have at the Nicolas Center, we have a director of supported employment that not only is that kind of matchmaking service for the individuals to find a job, but they also work directly with the employer to train them on how to be more inclusive in the workplace and to how to create very simple modifications in the workplace to make it more inclusive for the individual as well. So I have a great deal of hope with this new program, and there are a lot of employers out there that are very open and willing to take this on, but they need advocates to support that.
Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Can I just say one thing?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. My son is affiliated with Ken's crew. I mentioned them before. Ken Langhone, who is Langhone, NYU Langhone fame. An employer came to him. He also owns a Home Depot enterprise. And an employee came to him 20-something years ago and asked if he would give his son a job. And he said, sure, but why can't he apply? And he said, because he has autism and I can't find him a job anywhere, but I'm sure he could stock shelves. And he said, that's a great idea. And that's how Ken's Crew developed. So it's a subsidiary of Home Depot. They are amazing. And he has a job for the last 5 years because of supportive employment and a job coach. And if you ever go into Home Depot, you will see probably many individuals, and it's through that program that they are employed through Home Depot.
It is getting better. So the future is very bright for everybody. I would just like, in closing,
One more
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like blinded up here. Oh, here we are. I see, in the shadows.
Hi, thank you so much. I learned a lot, and Nicolas Center sounds like an amazing organization. My name's Larry, and I'm a teacher. I was completely clueless about special needs until during COVID time. I wanted to do something meaningful, and my pastor told me, hey, let me connect you with special needs children. And I was Googling on how I can help, and spectrum design came up. And my friend runs a printing and embroidery shop, and I started to bring the parents with special needs in. Long story short, we're doing weekend classes to teach special needs children printing and embroidery. It's going really well. The company is called Good Creation. I rave about you guys. I know you guys, I visit, we brought parents over doing open house for Spectrum Design, and you have Spectrum Bake, delicious cookies. We love it. My question is, how can we be a part of the Nicolas Center? How do we join the team?
I don't know, Nicole, I'm going to throw that one out to you, Executive Director.
So how do we join? The question is, how do they join Spectrum Designs?
Well, the Nicolas Center, when it was founded in 2011,
Yeah.
we really weren't expecting it to serve more than just the 8 young kids from Manhasset. It was going to be like a grassroots kind of neighborhood, community-based community engagement, and start a little printing shop. And we are now at about 130 individuals.
140,
And well, right, because we had a group of ambitious parents from Westchester who came down and said, oh, we want this also from where we are, and obviously you're too far. Point being is that it can be replicated. It's really some fundamental, I guess, principles, as opposed to just, there are certain things especially in Port Washington, there's certain elements to certain communities that make these types of operations that much more successful. And one is having such great access to many different nonprofits or for-profits, so we're in very close walking proximity, having incredibly supportive public officials that ensure that we continue to collaborate as a community and do things together. So as far as if you're from the new, I mean, we service individuals. People come obviously to the Nicolas Center from many different places, but I think in my mind, I would want to see many little Nicolas Centers and the sorts in everybody's town. You know, I live in Long Beach, you know, and I think that's a great place to have like a Nicolas Center, the same way it was in Pleasantville, or a mini one in Herricks, or whatever neighborhood you're from. But we welcome any, if you feel that this is something that you would like to see prosper in your area, or in maybe a cluster area. So the South Shore, I know we have a lot of people who come to us from the South Shore, and they said, when are you going to move to the South Shore? You know, when can we open something like this on the South Shore? But it takes a community. It takes not just, you know, everything sounds great when you say it really fast, but there is a lot of planning, but everything is possible when you have the power of very committed families and moms and dads and grandmas and community members who want to see it happen, who want their community to be able to embrace their citizens of their township that maybe, you know, they're a little bit.
That's how we started. We started
Yes.
off, my son is older than her son Adam, who is her son with autism, and my son was getting ready to transfer from Manhasset. And I kept saying, as a former educator, I said, why, you know, they kept saying, oh, well, there's a village up, you know, like 4 hours upstate, you know, he can go out here, 2 hours out Suffolk County. I'm like, I beg your pardon? I said, no. I said, I don't understand, why can't it happen here? Because, you see, it's taken me a lifetime to put in place the people in the community that know my son, the people at the library, the people where we go every day to get food, you know, from the deli and this and that. And they have come to appreciate all of that my son Nicolas has to offer, that he's a beautiful person. So I kept saying, stop telling me that I need to go, you know, 4 hours to like Cooperstown, New York. You know, you're insulting me now as a parent and somebody, you know, who's grown up on Long Island in this area my entire life. So our concept was, I want to create, you know, Nicolas University, and this is our campus, Port Washington. All right, so I got Nicolas U here. Why can't it? Why can't I have it here? Why can't they be safe with their families down the road, where we can become part and they can be intricate parts of this community? Each and every one of them has so much to offer, and you are not seeing that side of all we can contribute to this community. And so it started. We bought a little building, and we started with a machine that can only do 75 T-shirts a day. But the key to success in this is the marriage between the social enterprise or the business and the support mechanism. The Nicolas Center provides the vocational training, the supports, and everything else that the participant or the individual might need to be successful at Spectrum Designs or one of the other industries. This is the magic formula. Nicole?
Yeah, and I think that instead of thinking, oh, how do you get into the Nicolas Center in Port Washington, it's, well, how can our community create something similar, even without having to start your own business? There's so many businesses, I'm sure, within your own township that you patronize and that you access as taxpayers and citizens of the township. So I think that we would be happy to speak to whoever's interested in applying, but obviously, like you said, there is a waiting list. But I am always open to speaking to families who wish to figure out a way to kind of recreate or assimilate this within their own town. And I think that with the numbers and with the community members, you'd be able to, instead of creating your own business, maybe working with your Chamber of Commerce and figuring out which business owners, and they should get tax credits, or there should be other privileges, I believe, within New York State for for businesses who do offer employment, or at least vocational experiences, real vocational experiences. And you get that done really in numbers. You know, you get that done working with your churches, your synagogues, and you put God in anything, and everything is possible. So I do think that's where you start, and then you get into your community, you get into with your local public officials, and the more of a voice that you have, the more energy you have behind it. You're not just one parent in like this lonely town where like, because there's so many more of you, I'm sure, within the town. We had a woman who called us, and she was from Stuytown in Manhattan. I mean, like, place is huge. It was built with the concept of it being an inclusive community. And she says, I know there's other people here. I see the yellow buses. I know that they're here. I just don't know where they are. And I'm like, well, yeah, so let's do it. It's really an idea. It's not necessarily, there's nothing, don't take this personally, any of you. It's nothing really magical about what we're doing at the Nicolas Center. It's more just common sense kind of application of how communities should respond to the citizens of their towns. I just feel it's a very human concept of taking care of the people in your village and supporting one another.
Basic human dignity. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, and Port Washington just happens to do a really great job at it. So kudos to all of you Port Washingtonians, is that what you call yourself? And because is that what you call yourself? But because they have been they've accepted us with a tremendous amount of grace. We were even asked to be the Grand Marshal of the parade, all of the individuals. So, that says something. That really does say something, and we feel very blessed to be here in Port Washington, but I do believe that this can be created in just about any town, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody about that. I think that would be a really great...
That's the concept. They have the right to live, work, recreate, and be a contributing member to their hometowns, to their own communities, if that's where they want to be. End of discussion, period. That's it. I would just very quickly, I know we're over, I would really, again, just like to give some shout-out thank yous to our participants. Leanne, I'll let you do those honors, but to Angela and Scott Jaeger, again, I am humbled. Thank you so much. This would not be possible without you, and I thought it was very informative, and again, every time I go out, I learn so much from the audience, your questions. It gives us great insight. Thank you very much. Landmark team, thank you very much. You went above and beyond. Executive Director, Richard Mayer. Amanda, who runs this place. Thank you, Amanda. I want you to know, you want to talk about weird, just a concept. Amanda, who runs the Landmark, we grew up in Garden City, and then we both went to the same, I'm much older than she is, but we both are alumni of the same college, which had Hartwick College, which is less than 2,000, and then we both reside in Port Washington, and our mom's here, so it's like, whoa, how many degrees? So thank you, Amanda. You were absolutely, we couldn't have done this without you. There was so much planning. The Fathom Hotel. Thank you so much. Cindy and Steve Lee were very gracious in giving us accommodations for our guest who fell in love with Long Island. And again, let me thank Bridget Shipman for coming as the author and to coming to speaking, sharing her experience. And again, let's have a big hand for our panelists, Dr. Snow, Dr. Coffin, Jeremy, and in there, all of our our team, Nicolas. Thank you so much. There they are. You are talking about the gold standard right here. Thank you all.
And I would just like to thank all of you for being here tonight. It's really important, and these conversations are what our community is all about, and we hope that you made some connections this evening and learned something and felt supported and enlightened. And thank you to everyone on this stage and Councilwoman Dalimonte. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Mariann, for, sharing this concept and making it happen. I loved it. Oh, please, over here, if any of you are so inclined, Bridget will be here. She will autograph, and you can get a copy of her book. And, of course, you can help yourself to as many chocolates on the way out as you'd like. Again, made by the Nicolas Center Chocolate Lab, made with a lot of love.
Are we wedding?